We used to plan all of our marketing in this state of constant urgency where we would have like something coming up, or we wouldn't have anything coming up actually, and we would on Monday say, hey, we're running a promotion this Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And it was this constant state of urgency, super high amounts of stress, everything was last minute, it was all rushed. And there's a great quote by an entrepreneur named Alex Hormozi that's always stuck with me, and he said, mistakes love a rushed decision. And so we have to kind of take a step back and say, you know, as a marketing agency, we've been doing this for a long time. So we have a lot of experience. We've tried a lot of different things. And what we've found works is working in 90-day increments. And so what I want to do in this episode, I'm going to walk you through, hey, how do we zoom out and look at what are my goals for the entire year? What's the revenue, the profit, the cash goal, whatever that might be. And how do I look at the entire year? And how do I zoom this into more bite-sized and attainable chunks in 90 days? And we usually do this in quarters. And so I'm gonna walk through the different steps that we follow in order to plan 90 days so you feel ahead and you feel confident and you see better results from your marketing that you can carry quarter over quarter. The first step to planning the next 90 days is looking back at the previous 90 days. I know it sounds pretty crazy, but we need to start by looking back at what worked and what didn't work. We want to say, hey, what was the campaign that we launched to our list that crushed it? And also, what was the campaign that we launched that completely bombed? They didn't do well whatsoever. And then take those findings and then look at our ads and look at our offers and look at our social media and look at the different channels of marketing that we're doing. Even analyze your in-person events. You might be doing in-person events right now. Maybe it's working. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's sucking your life and it takes a lot of time and it's just breaking even. Look at all of those things. So we're gonna measure the last quarter so that way we can take what's working and move forward. Now, really briefly, I'm gonna start sharing some visual things here on my iPad. So if you're listening and you're on the road, you're driving, you're just listening to the audio version, I'm gonna verbally try to explain these the best that I can. But if you want the real impact of letting your brain absorb this a little better, you can go ahead and check this out on YouTube. The video is a little bit more instructional and over the shoulder, you're gonna be able to see some of the drawings and well, hopefully good drawings as we go through this. So if we're gonna work in 90-day cycles, that first step is to measure the last quarter. And if we look at our marketing, so I have a Venn diagram here, and if I were to draw quadrants right over that Venn diagram, and we look at our marketing, we kind of look at two things. We look at the impact, which is vertical. So impact is the line going up and down, and then we look at resource, which is horizontal. And this is the line, this kind of the low end and the high end. We have 4 quadrants here. So on the left side of resource, we have high resources. Now, high resources are things that are going to take a lot of money. They're going to take a lot of time. That's why they're on the left side. They're bad. They are red in this case. But then we have things on the other end that are low resources. Ooh, that's green. Green equals good in Josh Coffey's drawings here. So things that take low resource to execute, low time, low dollars, that's a spot we really want to be in. But then we have impact going vertically here. So in impact, we have things that are high impact. We usually look at things that are high leverage. And so in this case, email marketing, SMS, ads, those are usually a high impact because whether I'm sending an email to 100 people or 100,000 people, it's still the same email. It doesn't take 1,000 times more work. So those are usually high impact and they're high leverage. Then we have things that are low impact. Social media, for the most part. We have social media oftentimes is that. Not for everybody, but for many other brands and the clients we work with, that's what we see. And so this is how we're going to measure the last quarter. So if I'm now looking at my Venn diagram here, there are things that you're doing right now that are a high resource. So the things that are a high resource and a low impact, these are the things that we want to stop doing. But then there are going to be some things that you analyze and you say, hey, well, this wasn't necessarily a high resource, a low resource. It wasn't a high impact, it wasn't a low impact. It was just like Goldilocks. It was just right in the middle. These things we'll keep doing, but how much we keep doing, we might pull back a little bit. We might put those in more of what we call a maintenance mode, where you just cut it by like 70 or 80%, but you still keep doing it. And then you're gonna have these things. So when you analyze your marketing, you're gonna see that these are the things that were very leveraged. They were a lower resource, but they produced a much higher impact. And the marketing efforts that you're doing, when you look at each thing, you look at email, you look at SMS, you look at Facebook ads, Google ads, TikTok ads, all of the social platforms that you're doing, the blogging, the SEO, the podcast, whatever you're doing on the marketing, the farmers markets you're going to. When you go analyze these, you're gonna have a good idea just by a gut feeling of how they're doing, and you'll be able to see tangible results from that. And if it's green, meaning this is a relatively low resource and has a high impact, is very leveraged, then we are going to do more of this. So the goal is to stop doing things that are a high suck on your resources, time and money, and have a low impact on your bottom line. We're gonna keep doing things that are kind of Goldilocks, and we're gonna start doing more of things that are really, really killing it for you. I'll give you an example. When our team analyzed the last 90 days, we learned that this podcast is a huge impact for our business. And the resource to do it, it's kind of medium. It's not super low, but it's not super high either. And so we've decided, instead of releasing 4 episodes a month, we're gonna be releasing 6 episodes a month. Every other Friday, we're gonna have an additional episode coming out. And so as you kind of analyze and measure your marketing, it will then allow you to move into the second step, and that is to set very clear goals so we know where we're going over the next 90 days. And so let me explain what I mean by that. If we're looking at the year is generally divided, right, for the most part, well, not for the most part, this is for everybody, into 4 quarters, right? We have Q1, we have Q2, Q3, and we have Q4. And so with this in mind, every year, and you probably do this in your business, right? You set a vision. And your vision, if you want to accomplish it, has to be broken down into bite-sized pieces. So you might set a revenue goal. You probably have a revenue goal. You might have a profit goal. You might have a number of new customers you want to acquire goal. And so if we're going to accomplish these, and we're going to leverage marketing to accomplish the overarching vision, it's best to break this down into smaller bite-sized increments. So we will work in 90-day sprints. So in 90-day increments, we begin planning out our marketing, and we begin working in that with the idea of, how do we accomplish the major vision? We then have to reverse engineer this and break this down. And so I'm gonna give you some really tactical things here for how we do this, because it's really easy to say, and I'm just gonna give an example here. Let's say that my vision and maybe my goals here, and it has a revenue goal. And let's say I just have a simple revenue goal. And my revenue goal is, and I'm gonna use a really easy number here, just for simplicity, $1 million, right? My goal is 1 million. But last year I did 600,000. Well, that's a pretty decent sized jump, right? That's a 66% jump in revenue that I have to accomplish. And I'll tell you, here's what I did this for so many years until I realized it just depressed me. And here's what that is. I went ahead and said, okay, I wanna break $1 million in revenue. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do, obviously it makes a ton of sense. Let's make sure that we produce 25% of the revenue in Q1, 25% of the revenue in Q2, 25% of the revenue in Q3, and of course, 25% of the revenue in Q4. Whose business works like that? It's divided evenly. It probably isn't like that. Heck, you could go and look at your profit and loss statement. You can run it by quarter, and you would figure out of the total revenue percentage of the whole year, everything likely doesn't end up equally. And so if we want a really practical way to say, well, how do I accomplish my overarching vision of, let's say, $1 million? Well, we have to remember, at the beginning of the year, we're starting at the running pace that we were last year, right? Or we don't have the momentum that we would need right out of the gates. Usually goals are this stretch in order to accomplish those. And so instead, what we're gonna do before we get to the tactical of the marketing is we have to say, well, how do we win as marketers? And that is by having clear set goals that we need to accomplish and then measuring those goals. And so here's what I started doing in our company, and this makes a lot more sense once you start doing this, and it becomes more achievable and less depressing. And here's what that is. It's simply dividing out these 4 quarters based on what you know your busy season is. And here's what it looks like for most e-commerce businesses. Usually Q1 is usually a slow quarter. So this might be 15% of your revenue. Well, I'm gonna set, if my goal is $1 million, then I'm gonna say, hey, my goal for Q1 is actually 15% of the overarching goal for the entire year. Q2 usually begins to pick up, and it might look something like 20%. Q3, we start to see this spike, and it might look like 30%. And then Q4 is where we then get to pump on the love of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and it bumps up to 35%. And so if your revenue is divided out between the entire year, it probably is gonna look a little different than 25% in 4 different quadrants. And so, in 4 different quarters. And so instead, you can go historically look at your profit and loss statement from last year and say, what were my percentages? And just use those as a starting point. Because if we do this, then it becomes really mathematical. And we say in our intro video to this, to our podcast, our live streams, we say this all the time. Marketing is a mathematical equation, not an emotional decision. And so a lot of times in business, we go and we set these big dreams. We set these visions of here's what I want to accomplish. Here's the revenue goals, the profit goals, the customers we want to do, the lives we want to impact, etc. But then we don't get really tangible with it. And we say, okay, we want to do this over the whole year, and we just divide it by 4. But we never think, how do we actually tangibly accomplish that? And so this makes it tangible. So if my vision is, or my goal is $1 million in a year, I might only do 150 in Q1 because, of course, I'm ramping up. I'm also dialing in my marketing and my customer journey and just setting better foundations for the year in my business. And so if we break our revenue down, it gives us some tangible numbers. So using that, let's run some math here. So in Q1, if my goal is 15% of the goal of $1 million, then I'm looking at $150,000 in revenue. Instead of looking at the entire rest of the year, I'm only looking in 90 days. Now I have the whole goal for the entire year, like what I'm looking to accomplish, but I need to be real mathematical about this. So if I'm trying to produce $150,000, ask yourself, what is the average order value? And I'm just gonna use my handy dandy calculator here. If my average order value is, let's just say $50, I'm gonna take $150,000 divided by $50, and that is 3,000 customers. So I'm gonna pump this down and say 3,000 customers. Well, this is something that marketing can help get. If we have these big revenue goals throughout the whole year, the goal is to accomplish it throughout the year. And so if we can break this down into bite-sized chunks and then work in 90-day sprints and then plan our marketing around that, it feels a lot more attainable. And so now my goal has changed. Okay, if I want to accomplish 150,000 in gross revenue, AOV is $50. I need 3,000 customers. And now this is where you then can begin to dive deeper and reverse engineer what it's going to take in order to accomplish the goals that you've set out to accomplish with your marketing. So this is the first like 2 little steps here. So step number 1, we need to look at the last quarter and say, hey, what have I noticed working in my business? Maybe social media started working for you and you're like, hey, this is something we need to put more resource into, or maybe a certain ad channel did, so you put more resource into that. So analyze, what do I need to stop doing, keep doing, start doing, or continue doing? And then we look at the entire year, all quarters, we say, what's our revenue goal? Because marketing, the job of marketing is to acquire customers and produce profits, ultimately driving our vision or our mission of $1 million. And so if we're gonna accomplish that, how do we divide this out into realistic chunks of 4, then divide that down to amount of customers that we need to get. Now with this in mind, there's one final calculation before we actually move into the bulk of kind of what I wanna cover with how we actually plan this out from like a tactical standpoint. So if I wanna have 3,000 customers, I then need to determine what is my deficit? What is my deficit? And here's what I mean by that. Maybe right now, last January, we'll look at last January. Let's say last January that you did 1,200 customers. So if you did 1,200 customers last January, then in order to accomplish this over what you normally do, there is an 1,800 customer deficit. So I need to say, hey, my current run rate as is 1,200. I need to do another 1,800 customers. Let's get strategic. Or maybe it was higher than 1,200, it was 2,000. We need to get 1,000 extra customers than we did last year. Well, let's begin to reverse engineer this with what marketing efforts will help that happen. And do it in a way that says, hey, in order to accomplish this, what has done the best historically? What kind of email promotions? What kind of offers have we done? What kind of ads have we done in order to actually make this happen? Cool. So once we've done this, then we're gonna implement a simple strategy of sand, pebbles, and rocks. This was a concept I did not invent. And so before we go kind of into the calendar and show you how we plan this out, this is a concept by Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, I don't know if he originated this idea, but it's pretty brilliant. And that is like, if you imagine a jar, this represents your life. And in your life, you have rocks, pebbles, and sand. And rocks are like the super important things. Like is your family, your health, other really big priorities, your business, things like that. And then those are the things that like, if everything else was left out, but you had the rocks, you have the bulk of what you need. The pebbles are other things that matter, like your job, your house, your car, etc. And the sand represents like the small things, like the minor things, the material possessions, the coffee mugs, like the small stuff that it's like, hey, if you didn't have that in your life, it really wouldn't impact it in a major negative way. And so if you were to fill the jar first with sand and then pebbles and then rocks, you'd find that everything doesn't fit. And there would be these gaps left in there. But if you were to put in the rocks first, the most important things, and then you were to put in the pebbles, and then you were to put in the sand, well, then everything would fit. And so if you take this concept and you work backwards, instead of sand, pebbles, rocks, and first we say, hey, what are those rocks in our marketing that produce the best results, that are the most reliable, that we have done and seen good stuff from? And then we took the pebbles and we're like, hey, these are kind of like okay results, right? The yellow area we talked about before. And then we took the sand, which is like I view this as more daily evergreen stuff, really simple stuff to do. If we filled the jar, or let's say the quarter, with these, and we planned in advance, well, you'd be able to fit everything in rather than getting to like a week and you just decide, hey, this weekend we're going to run this 48-hour flash sale on the entire store or on this collection or on this product, and then you're scrambling in that week between if you and your team, or maybe you are your team, and you're scrambling to get all this stuff done, and then you're just wildly overwhelmed, and of course, mistakes love a rushed decision, and so you start making all these mistakes, dropping the balls. You forgot, oh, I ran this and I forgot to actually create the coupon code in the email, and now I'm getting all these support requests. And so if we do this in our marketing, I promise you, like your stress is gonna go down and your confidence is gonna go up, as well as the results that you produce from your marketing. And so if I look at these, I'm gonna break these down. I'm gonna show you how we would do this in a quarter. And I'm gonna use a calendar here and walk through how we do this, starting with rocks. Now, rocks are gonna vary by business, but I'll tell you, here's what I believe most listening or watching this are gonna have in this order. The first thing is gonna be your sprints. Now, sprints are typically email and SMS, or they're big promotional pushes. So a lot of times this is email and this is SMS, but ultimately promo sprints can include a lot of different things. So when we run sprints, these are marketing sprints, we like to run them every 4 to 6 weeks. Now, why are these rocks? These are rocks because they're a lot of work. A sprint could be a 24-hour, a 48-hour, or like a 72-hour promotion that you run. And we like to create this every 4 to 6 weeks because they create cash injection in our business. And a lot of the time it comes from our email and our SMS and our social media, like things that don't cost us ad dollars to acquire customers or to get repeat orders. And so we begin by looking at the next 90 days, and we say, looking at the next quarter and saying, what are the promo sprints that I'm gonna run. And so that way we can begin working towards preparing those so nothing is last minute, and then we start to fill in things around that. So we look at rocks as sprints. So let me give you an example here. If I am looking at, if I look at the 2024 calendar and I have January, February, and March here, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and use a little highlighter here, and I'm gonna use green for the promo sprints here. So we're looking at a calendar. I'm gonna look ahead and say, okay, well, what kind of promos have done really well for me? Do one day do well? Do 2 day or 3 day do well? Or do even holiday ones do well? So let's look at what upcoming holidays do we have and what types of promotions have I done that have done well that I can run again. So let's go ahead and look. Well, there's no real holidays in the first quarter if I'm using this as an example, but maybe Valentine's Day. So we have Valentine's Day. Woo! Some of you probably don't even do a promotion on Valentine's Day, but that's okay. So I'd come in here and say, okay, maybe Valentine's Day does work for me. Well, I might go ahead and mark off Valentine's Day as a 1 day promotion or 1 day sprint that I'm going to run. But we like to do promo sprints every 4 to 6 weeks, so we have regular cash injection, not every 3 months. We want to be more active than that. So every quarter, every 90 days, we're doing 2 to 3 sprints where we're doing a big push with a big promotion on our website to create this cash injection. And so let's pretend that Valentine's Day is a promotion that I can do. Well, here's the other cool thing. When you're planning promotions and you're like, hey, what should I do? What we've learned is a reason is a good reason. So it doesn't really matter the reason, just give a reason. I remember 2 years ago, we did 30% off of something because I turned 30. You could do, hey, our company is X years old, so we're doing this promo. Hey, it's Valentine's Day. Hey, flash sale. No reason. We're just running a flash sale. Hey, New Year promotion. And so we're going to plan these out. And so in this example, I'm going to say, hey, let's pretend I'm a subscription box. I might let's say I run a promo once a month. A lot of subscription boxes, we see like every 4-week promo cycle. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and run a weekend sale on January 19th, 20th, and 21st. A Friday, a Saturday, Sunday. So we have a 72-hour, and we're just going to run a flash sale here. And then I need something for March. So in March, I can go ahead and say, hey, you know, we're kind of starting to get into spring. So let's go ahead and let's do a spring sale. And I'm going to go ahead and throw down the last 3 days or the last 2 days of March. So I'll say the 29th and the 30th, which are actually a Friday and a Saturday here. Once we've got those rocks in, there are obviously things that need to be done in advance of this. So once we've planned those, before we get into the nitty-gritty of every piece that needs done, we'll come back and we'll do that. But the first thing we're gonna do is fill in our rocks, and now that our rocks are in, we know these are the big promotional weekends or days that we're gonna create cash injection in the business. I have those in, they're locked, they're on the calendar, or they're in my project management tool, however you're planning, we have these locked in, or you write them on a physical calendar, we have them locked in. Now we need to go fill in the Pebbles. So from a Pebbles standpoint, here's what we view as Pebbles. When we look at Pebbles, we're usually talking about our regular email or SMS cadence. Now yours might be different. Everyone is in a different spot in their business. Some of you watching are doing 7 figures a month. Some of you are doing several thousand or several $100s a month. Some of you are just getting started. So based on where you're at in your business, your rocks, pebbles, and sand might look a little bit different. That said, we typically see Pebbles as your regular email cadence and your SMS cadence, which are usually tied together. So what this kind of looks like is, okay, well, if we're launching these emails here, when am I going to be sending my regular weekly email? And we recommend sending 1 email per week. And I'm going to use a little yellow highlighter here on the calendar to kind of dictate what that is. We recommend sending 1 email a week unless we review a previous quarter and we see a rise in email results. Then we might say, hey, let's go to 2 emails per week for the next quarter and see how that does. And then once we do that, if it keeps going well, we might even up it from there. We have clients that send emails 365 days a year, and they do a lot of money from emails because emails work for them. And so as you grow, email becomes a higher leverage activity. As your list grows, if you have 100,000 people on your list for 10,000, same amount of time to send an email. The results of revenue produced, substantially different. And so as you go, I'm gonna assume your email will probably begin to pick up. But the initial cadence we recommend is 1 time per week. So I'm gonna come in here and I'm just gonna set an example of what that might be. So I might say, hey, I send an email every single Wednesday. So we have the 3rd, we have the 10th. And so we're just gonna do this process of going through and saying, okay, we got our rocks. Now we need to come in and we need to fill in these pebbles. Well, you know what? This is interesting. Valentine's Day, February 14th fell on a Wednesday. Well, in that case, well, guess what? Boom, it's a twofer. You don't have to send a separate email that day. You just got to plan the amount of emails you're sending and it all comes together. So that's the cool thing. Especially as you get into Q4 and we're in like different times of the year, depending on where we're at, you might have this overlap of your regular email and SMS cadence will kind of overlap with the promo sprints, and that's totally okay. So I'm just gonna keep this going here. Then we have the 21st, and then we have the 28th. Oh, hey, what do you know? It's a leap year. That's pretty cool. All right, and then we have the 20th of March and the 27th of March. Great. So now we have all of our pebbles. And let's say that this is our SMS in our email. This is our weekly email cadence that we've going out. You might send more than that. If so, go ahead and mark that down or use your project management tool to do that. Then finally, we have the sand. Now, from a sand standpoint, we look at sand as usually the evergreen. So while most of the other ones are very like timely things that you're doing, like promo sprints that we're only running a couple of them a quarter, 2 to 3 a quarter, email and SMS, we got a weekly cadence. Evergreen are things that happen on the daily, right? So if they're happening on the daily, then usually, it depends with everyone, but usually this is gonna relate to social and ads. So if we have our social media and our ads, we then of course need to get down to that and say, well, what does this begin to look like? Now, I don't need to go mark on my calendar every single day of social media and ads, put a dot on there for every one of those that's happening. But I have to say, okay, once I have my rocks planned, my pebbles planned, then I need to say, okay, within my evergreen stuff, my social, my ads, I need to reflect and evaluate what am I gonna do? How many pieces of content am I putting out per day, per week? What's our ad spend gonna have to also be in order to accomplish the 3,000 customers? So if you're paying $20 to acquire a $50 customer, $30 to acquire a $50 customer, whatever that is, reverse engineer how many you're gonna have to pay and what your ad spend will be. So this starts to get into deeper planning I'm not gonna go into, but this is how we're gonna start to fill in the gaps with the sand. We're gonna start to say, okay, we got these monthly things happening, we have these weekly things happening, we have these daily things happening. And typically we have sprints, email and SMS cadence, and then our social ads. And of course, this could vary. You might blog, and maybe blogging goes in there. Some people do podcasts, maybe that goes in there somewhere. And so we're gonna go ahead and we're going to reverse engineer all this, rocks, pebbles, sand, put it in the jar, plan out the quarter. But there are a few final little pieces that we use to tie this all together. So once we have determined what our evergreen funnel is going to be, our email, SMS, and our sprints, then you have to go do this actual technical thing. And I don't know here who actually uses a project management tool, but if you don't, it's going to make your life a lot easier. We are huge fans of a tool called ClickUp. Just like it sounds, clickup.com. It's wonderful. There are plenty of others. There's Asana, there's Teamwork Projects, there's tons of different Trello, there's tons of different tools out there. This is gonna make your life a lot easier. Because once we've gone ahead and planned our 90 days, we take these and we're gonna move this stuff into our project management tool or however you might do that. And so once we come in, we're gonna then delegate. We're gonna delegate each one of these. And so once we delegate each one of these, we're then going to move it down and break out the projects of what actually needs to happen. So let me give you an example of a promo sprint. We have one of these happening at the end of the month in the e-commerce alley. We do every 3 to 4 months, we do a live boot camp. Some of you have gone through it. It's our scientific Facebook ads testing system with the Ad Lab method. We do a live version and it's super fun and it's always a blast. And we do it once every 3 to 4 months. We have that coming up the last 3 days of January. And so knowing that, I need to say what needs to happen to accomplish that project. I need to reverse engineer. How many emails do we need, right? What do we need to run? We need to run an ad lab before we actually launch the ads. We need to determine our budget. What are those very tactical things that need to happen? And if we're planning a promo sprint, you're going to determine, hey, what is my offer and timeline? You might say, hey, I might need to write and design the emails. I need to schedule the emails, and I might even need to create the coupon codes, right? I might have to create the coupon codes because oftentimes we overlook that. And so once we have our strategy in place, we then plan these projects, we plan the action items. Some of you have a team, delegate to your team based on the role. Some of you are the team. So just knowing that, break down what needs to be done by what point in time so that you don't live in this state of constant urgency and overwhelm, like in last minute on like everything, like, oh my goodness, we're losing it because we have to do this today. And so by doing this process of looking at your year and quarters, breaking down your goals, and then rock, pebbling, and sanding every 90 days, it's gonna allow you to stay in advance. And so how we kind of keep accountable to this, and I'll close on this. Here's how we keep accountable to this. We have kind of 3 levels that things happen. So we have the quarterly level, and then we have the weekly level. And then we have the monthly level. So the quarterly level overviews all of this. So quarterly, we go ahead and internally within our team, knowing, hey, each quarter, these are the big things that we need to accomplish in our marketing. We establish quarterly rocks because these are the rocks, right? We literally call them rocks in our company. And we have, everybody has rocks they need to complete throughout the whole quarter. And so we establish quarterly rocks. Then every month, so these are the monthlies, every month. So monthly, we then plan. So we have monthly planning where we then say, okay, this month, what are the promo sprints we're running? What are the emails we're running, et cetera. And then every week, we then have weekly progress updates. So in our case, we have a team. So when our team gets together, we actually do progress updates on the month, the things that we need to get done for the month, and also updates on where we're at as far as the rocks that we are responsible for that quarter. So this is our process. And if you apply this, you can apply this in a lot of ways outside of just marketing, but this is how we apply it in a marketing standpoint, where we kind of first start by analyzing and measuring what happened in the last quarter. What are those things that we need to stop doing, keep doing, and start doing or continue doing even more? Where do we need to focus our resource? Then we go and say, based on our goals as a company for the next 12 months or for the rest of the year, whatever time I'm doing this process, how can I break it down into actually attainable things, keeping in mind that usually goals aren't just broken down into 25%, 25%, 25%, and 25%. Break it down more and then establish what are the rocks, what are those pebbles, and what are the sand that I need to do to fill that in to have a very cohesive marketing strategy for the next 90 days, that there's so much clarity in it, there's so much confidence in it, and then that way you don't feel this mass degree of overwhelm, and instead you feel this joy that you're like, this is amazing, we're working ahead, and then you get to analyze these every quarter and set the next quarter and follow this cadence. So this is a routine that we follow to have very effective marketing that also doesn't feel last minute and like it's burning you alive from the amount of work that goes into it. You've been listening to the E-Commerce Alley podcast produced by Dylan Counts. If you're really enjoying this podcast, you're finding a lot of value out of it, go ahead and please do us a favor, rate the podcast. It takes like 5 seconds with your thumb. Just give us a rating. If you want to write something and you're on like iTunes, we would love it. But even if you just give us a rating, it would mean the world to us. And if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and we'll see you in the next episode.